right now, everybody, if you have not done your fantasy draft so far, you probably have one this weekend. Labor Day weekend is a great time to do some fantasy football. So why don't we go to the island?
Welcome to our Fantasy Island.
Fantasy season is in full swing, and today to talk a little fantasy football, I am going to be bringing on one of the best in the business. You see all of her work on the Action Network. Let's bring in Sammy Previte. And Sammy, how are you today?
Hi, I'm doing so well.
We appreciate you having on. By the way, I know it's a little, I need to call you Samantha because our producer, Sammy, is the Sammy of record on this show, but we'll say Sammy Stacks of the Action Network. We appreciate you being on. How many fantasy leagues are you currently in right now?
Ooh, that's a touchy question. I don't know. It's probably like 6 season-long ones and then like lots of just best ball type drafts that I did throughout the summer.
Best ball drafts, of course, being the ones where you draft it and forget it, which is what I love. I don't want to be bothered. I want to go out there and make draft picks, great draft picks, and go about my business that way. But for season long, now over the last couple of weeks, I've started to indulge in a couple of season long leagues. And one of the strategies that I've been using, I've been approaching is I've been going running back heavy. I've been going running back. I think they call that hero RB now. I don't know. There's so many fancy names, Samantha. I don't even know what to call it. What is your kind of strategy when you go into a season long fantasy draft?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely depends on what pick I have, because especially like earlier on, I kind of let the best player available dictate how I'm going to end up drafting. Because like I'm a big running back fan as well, but like I'm not going to pass up on Justin Jefferson, if he falls to me or something like that. So then I might have to pivot strategies. I think it's important to have that kind of flexibility and agility to sort of pivot because like even when I did Scott Fish one year, I had the 6th pick and I had like everything plotted out. I thought I was going to get Alvin Kamara and then Travis Kelce or something like fell to me at that pick. And it's a tight end premium league or something. And I just remember being like, all right, well, my whole strategy is out the window, but that's okay. Like, in the end, I was like, oh, I got a good pick here. So, so just being kind of agile, but for sure, RB heavy. I think a hero RB, I think, is when you take one running back early. So, like, say you take Christian McCaffrey or like Jonathan Taylor, and then ignore running back for the rest of like the next like 5 rounds or so. So, I mean, I've definitely done that strategy, but there's a whole frozen pond of mediocre running backs in like the 20 to 35 range that are. You're kind of like, do I really trust Clyde Edwards-Helaire is like my RB2 or something? So yeah, it can get dicey because I feel like it's tough because on one hand, RBs are just so exposed to injury risk. So like you always have the risk of losing them for extended periods of time. But it is such a valuable position because there are so few guys that are in like unchallenged positions where they're going to get a lot of carries and not have to share it with another guy.
Yeah, and it's really interesting that you bring up Justin Jefferson. What is the best entry point for Justin Jefferson? Let's say the first couple of picks are Jonathan Taylor, Christian McCaffrey, Austin Eckler, Derrick Henry. Those are typically the top 4. Do you draft Justin Jefferson over any one of those 4 guys?
In PPR, I'm definitely taking Justin Jefferson, probably like 4th. So that would be over Derrick Henry in that case.
Oh, wow. So that's a pretty good entry point. And again, that's why it's always important to be the amoeba and to be able to, as you said, be agile in case these things happen. And if you're sitting there in the 8th spot and Justin Jefferson's still there, you're like, well, I'm going to have to go in on that. I've been trying to dupe my friends on Fantasy Live. I have not, over the last couple of weeks, I have not even mentioned Justin Jefferson because I'm laying in wait. And I'm going to spring it on them. I'm going to spring it on them at the last second.
That's so funny. I mean, I just did my work draft this week and like just the way that the cookie crumbled, I had the pick like my editor was the 12 pick and I was the 11 pick, and he reads all the stuff that I write. So he was taking a whole, but like he knew what I was doing. He took a whole bunch of guys that I was like, oh, don't sleep on these guys. And then he obviously took them from me. So sometimes it doesn't pay off to give out your advice, like the actual advice that you're going to use to draft.
That's exactly the point. Like, I feel like I'm drafting multiple teams. My friends, the DePaulo brothers, all the time, all the players that I talk up, like they're gone. I'm like, I basically have 3 teams in this league, similar to you, where it's like you and your editor, like you guys might as well just combine teams because you're not getting a full. They should not be allowed to pick anybody, especially if it's your network. Like if it's your like I'm working for you. You should not be robbing me. It's offensive even. But so we like Justin Jefferson. Both of I we're on board with Justin Jefferson. I'm assuming then if you said that Christian McCaffrey is one of your top 4, you feel comfortable drafting Christian McCaffrey, even though the injuries have burned people over the last couple of years?
Yes, I am ready to get hurt again. It's just his ceiling is obviously so high. Those injuries, I mean, it just seems like a really like a string of bad luck type injuries. None of them, they're not Achilles injuries, for instance. Like I'm more concerned about Cam Akers than I am about Christian McCaffrey.
Thank you. Yes.
It just seemed like a whole bunch of random things. Like it's like a quad that he was out for a couple weeks for, and then like an ankle and then a rib injury. Like there was all these like kind of random things. So I'm really hoping that bad luck doesn't follow him. I'm also hoping that because I suspect that the Panthers will be more competitive this season. I don't think they're going anywhere. I mean, I think they're going to do the fabled Carolina tradition of getting like just enough wins to not get a premium draft pick, but also not make the playoffs. But because I think they're going to be a little more competitive, I think that'll help because also like maybe game scripts for one, but also like, you know, I feel like they had no incentive to keep him on the field last year and in the year prior to when, you know, like he's a $64 million running back. And, you know, if they've got 3 wins at that point in the season, why risk that? But I think that if they're more competitive this year, I think we'll see more of CMC just overall. So yeah, I'm ready to get hurt again.
No, I love all that. I'm on board with everything that you said because I feel that every guy or girl, whoever, that is like, I don't want to take Christian McCaffrey because of the injuries is also the same person who's like, I'm on board with Cam Akers. Like, how do you exist in this world? Like, how do both, like none of those, and I know they'll be like, well, I'm giving up a first round pick here. They're like, Cam Akers is still going in the 3rd round. Like, that's not a pick you should be throwing away on a guy who has a busted Achilles. Like, that's not an easy injury to come back from. So people are playing fast and loose, but I'm glad. And I was in a draft last night. Not that anybody cares about my teams, but
yeah, no one cares about your fantasy team.
But for instance, I was sitting there and I was picking 4th or 5th, whatever it was, but 4th at the worst. And I'm like, okay, so I've already talked myself into Dalvin Cook. I'm like, okay, and assuming Justin Jefferson was going to be gone, I'm like, I'm going to get a Viking. I mean, I'm figuring JT goes first, Christian McCaffrey probably goes second, and then Justin Jefferson, because I think Justin Jefferson to me has jumped ahead of Austin Eckler. But I'm like, well, I'm going to get a Viking. I'm going to live with it. And somehow I got Christian McCaffrey there. And it's always funny that the comments that come out of the woodwork of the scared people who are like, oh, look, hope he stays healthy. But I'm like, yeah, I do too. I wish that for every player. So but I don't care. I'm going to risk it. I'm going to totally do that. I have no hesitation. But speaking of Dalvin Cook, how do you feel about Dal this year? I know that if everybody loves Justin Jefferson, maybe you don't like Dalvin Cook as much, or do you think there's enough to go around for both those guys?
I do think there's enough to go around for both of those guys. I mean, I know he had a little bit of an off season last year, but like for him, an off season is still, you know, like 1,300 all-purpose yards. So it's not he didn't kill you last year, for instance. But yeah, I mean, I think there is going to be enough to go around. Kirk Cousins is actually one of my kind of like sleeper picks because I feel like everyone always sleeps on the Viking. Like, no, they're not sleeping on Justin Jefferson, but they're sleeping on like Kirk Cousins, and I'm like, you can't have
Obviously.
one and the like not the other. So I mean, I think that there's going to be a lot of guys that are in that offense that are kind of like undervalued. Irv Smith comes to mind. Even KJ Osborne is a guy for like best ball. I love him for best ball.
Oh my gosh, yeah, he's a great. Even though they got Jalen Reagor, it's not going to impact KJ Osborne at all because he's a better player. He just is. And I was talking to Stephanie Smalls about this too. Like, I have too much exposure to the Vikings. My sincerest dream is that, because I love Kirk Cousins too. Like, I'm just taking all the, because it's the offense. It's Kevin O'Connell. And I always throw out the example of Todd Gurley. First couple of years with Jeff Fisher, he was fine. He was sort of mid, though. Sean McVay takes over. Todd Gurley has the best season of his career. I could see the same thing happening with Dalvin Cook, same thing happening with Justin Jefferson. So I'm all in. And again, like you said, like, you cannot, the duality, you cannot be pro Jefferson and anti Kirk Cousins, because that can't exist. What you can do is be like, I hope the Vikings have the best offense in the league, but they win 4 games. That I can get on board with, because that's sincerely possible, because their defense might not be as good as a lot of people think. I want to stick with the running back position, because I get this question a lot too. And it's Saquon Barkley. And a lot of people have been burned. You're willing to take that risk for Christian McCaffrey. Are you willing to take a similar risk with Saquon Barkley, who's probably going to be drafted in the 2nd round?
Yeah, I mean, it depends where we're talking. Like, someone chastised me recently for not taking Barkley sort of like as a top 10 guy. And I was like, I don't know that he's in my top 10.
That's excessive.
But I would say, like, yeah, if we're getting to like the RB 14, 15 sort of range, I think that that's kind of like where I would feel comfortable taking him. Like, yeah, we've kind of seen it's been a rough couple years for sure for Barkley stands, but I also think that, yeah, I'm gonna give him that benefit too. I mean, I would say that his injuries are a little more serious than Christian McCaffrey's are, and there's still questions around the Giants offensive line now. I think they had a phenomenal draft, so but I've seen that they've had a number of injuries already, so that's kind of a little bit concerning. But like, just going back to McCaffrey, like, the Panthers made a ton of offensive line upgrades, including first rounder Ike Ekwonu. So I think that, like, that's another thing we need to factor in, that he'll be less exposed, and just the team's overall going to be so much better. So yeah, I mean, I'm partly in, let's say.
We're partly in. It's also a little bit concerning because Brian Daboll was the offensive coordinator for the Buffalo Bills, and they could never get Devin Singletary to have a full complete season. Zach Moss was like a rando, healthy scratch at times. I'm sort of concerned about it. But what do you do? Like, if you're sitting there, I guess the perfect situation is if you have the 1.01 and you get Jonathan Taylor, and Saquon Barkley in a 10-team league perhaps falls to you. Like, of course, that's a no-brainer. But what about guys like, if you have to choose between Saquon and, say, like Devontae Adams or Tyreek Hill, which way would you kind of go there?
Ooh, I might go Adams over Barkley, but not Hill, if that makes
Not
sense.
Hill. Why not? Why not Tyreek?
Ooh, I don't know. So, like, it's difficult for me to envision, like, right now, ADP wise, like, there's Hill and Waddle basically going as top 14 wide receivers. We've got Gesicki going as like a top 11 tight end. And then we've got Tua going as like quarterback 16 or something.
Another thing that doesn't translate. Yes,
right.
Exactly.
And I actually think this is maybe like the opposite thing, that maybe Tua is what we think he is. And maybe these guys are just going to get a little bit more limited, because I know Waddle's kind of dealing with an injury right now, but he was slotted in my head before the Hill trade as a top 12 guy. I think he has that talent. And I just think that, like, Hill will have a good season, but not a top 5 season, if that makes sense. So that's kind of like where I am with him.
You also have to factor in the Mike McDaniel offense. They love to run the football. And that goes back to the thing of San Francisco. Like, they run the football an awful lot. And they brought in Raheem Mostert, who, you talk about all the speed guys that the Dolphins have accumulated over the last couple of years. Like, Raheem Mostert, maybe the fastest guy of all of them, probably not faster than Tyreek, but also of all of them. By the way, if you're still listening or still following along on one of those on Facebook, on YouTube, why don't you use the word sick? Put it in the comments section right now. Let us know that you're continuing to party with us here on Fantasy Island. We appreciate you being here. We've got Samantha Previte, excuse me, rhymes with graffiti. I remembered that. This was why it took me so long to get you on the show, is that I didn't know quite how to say your last name.
Right. We had to meet in person. I had to give you the in-person phonetic.
Right. Well, the first time it was in Vegas during the draft, and I wasn't about to remember that. I ran into Chris Long. It was a big moment for me. But I'm super excited to have you here. We're talking about some of the biggest draft issues. You're dialed in with the Denver Broncos. You're out there in Colorado. You're going to be, you got a new role with the Denver Broncos broadcast. What are you going to be? I just saw this on Twitter. What are you doing with them?
Sure. It's not a new role. Last year, I did a weekly sort of segment for them on DFS, and I just sort of found out that will be renewed. So every Wednesday at 8 p.m., I will be on talking. It's going to be DFS, but also like prop bets, stuff like that, kind of season-long stuff, really just like anything that kind of comes to mind. Also, I just roast the host's fantasy team and fantasy takes. So that's always really fun. One of the hosts is Ben Albright. And he comes from like the real like NFL tape background, right? And
we know Albright, yeah.
Yeah, and he hates quarterbacks like Jalen Hurts, for instance.
Oh, that's right.
We have to like argue about that all the time. I told him like, yeah, you can leave that like 9 fantasy points every game on the table if you want.
Yeah, what are you? We're in on Jalen Hurts, right? I love Jalen Hurts. You're in on him, right?
Very in on him. I mean, obviously he had like almost 800 rushing yards last year. So yeah, it was an average of 8.5 fantasy points per game just from rushing. So, I mean, gotta love that. The upgrade in weapons. I'm really all in on him.
They also talk about, we love rookie running backs. Second-year wide receivers are also prime to break out. We talked about Jalen Waddle a moment ago. What about Devonta Smith? I am weirdly into Devonta Smith this season, even with A.J. Brown there. I think it's a better opportunity for Devonta Smith. How do you feel about him this season?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because I didn't like that side. We saw such good flashes of him last year. I am concerned about A.J. Brown being there because I just think like he's such a big bodied guy that's gonna like really overpower, be a great red zone target for Hurts. But I mean, I'm not out on him. I would say that I would take him in like the low end wide receiver 3 tier. Is that a little too low for you?
No. That's very fair. I'm looking at the fantasy football calculator as we talk, looking at half point PPR. I feel like most people should be playing half point PPR, but still, you see players like Amon-Ra St. Brown above him, like that's fine. But like Juju's ahead of him. I'm like, I don't know. Like he's going off in the 8th round, which I think is a great value for him. He's going ahead of Cordero Patterson, Amari Cooper, Brandon Ayuk. I kind of feel like he's valued where he should be. I like him a little bit more than, say, Hunter Renfrow. Like him more than Thielen, even though we love the Vikings. I like him more than Thielen, not as much as I like Darnell Mooney, but he's right there. I think we're okay. We're okay. I'm not counting on.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say I've taken a lot of Bears recently, just because you said Mooney.
You've taken it, yeah. How do you feel about who are you drafting? You're going Mooney, Montgomery? Where are you falling?
So no, I'm not taking Montgomery, but I took Mooney and Kmet recently, not in the same draft. I can't have that much exposure,
right?
Too. But yeah, I mean, Kmet's a guy that I wasn't in on, but like. If I'm punting at tight end and I'm like the last one to take a tight end, I feel okay about taking him. What do you think?
No, you know what? I'm with you. I know a lot of people think I'm a lunatic and they love to take shots at me on Twitter. Like, oh, you got so many Bears on your team. I'm like, I will have one Bear on my team. I like David Montgomery. I don't feel I'm not afraid to take him. But if I have Montgomery, I don't take Mooney. And if I have either one of those guys, I'm probably not taking Cole Kmet. So it's always a balance. Mooney, Kmet is my second tight end. I might do, but again, I think as much as I like the Bears, I know their offense is going to be probably not as high scoring as somebody like the Vikings. I think they're going to be a better defensive team, which means some of their games will likely be lower scoring. So, but Cole Kmet was a guy who last season as a 22-year-old had 600 receiving yards. He was targeted an awful lot. He just didn't score a lot of touchdowns. And I think that's going to be corrected this year. We saw it in the preseason already. So I think when you're looking for a deep sleeper at tight end, I mean, I'm going to try to get Kyle Pitts or somebody like that or Mark Andrews. But if I miss out on them and I got to go Cole Kmet, I'm not going to be concerned about it.
Yeah,
so I agree with you.
Brings up a good point about draft strategy to me, because I think like what's really important is to like maybe as an overall sort of tenet is to manage the risk you have throughout the draft. Like I think it's okay if you take Christian McCaffrey or Saquon Barkley or those guys, but I think then you have to manage it later with guys that are more blue chip players. The same thing goes for if you take a whole bunch of safe guys, or who's safe, but like relatively safe guys in early rounds. That's when you should like, then the later rounds, that is when I'm stocking up on a whole bunch of like rookie wide receivers, or like maybe backups that I think like are one injury away from being startable, or someone like, I don't know, like Nico Collins. Those types of guys come to mind. Like I'd much rather have them than, I don't know, some of these guys, it's like their ceiling is maybe a flex once in a while. Whereas like these other guys, these later round guys, I'm swinging for the fences with.
That's a great strategy. Yeah. Once you get that roster, you got your starters there and you feel pretty good about it. Like, let's go crazy. Like I said, I love rookie running backs, second year wide receivers. Nico Collins, you're speaking my language. I love him this year. We have a lot of, we love a lot of Texans in fantasy, or maybe just two guys. Maybe it's Nico. Damien Pierce has been rising up draft boards. He was a value when you were getting him in I'm looking at some of my old mock draft Mondays. He was like going in round 13 to me. Then it was round 8. Now it's round 3. What is an acceptable spot for Damien Pierce?
You're probably asking the wrong person.
No, I'm asking the right person. Talk sense to us. I've just
not been as in on Damien Pierce. I was concerned about his usage in college. That is, I mean, yes, like the guys can overcome that, but that is a pretty good predictor of like the type of workload that a guy can handle. Now, he has obviously been extremely impressive in this preseason and everything like that, but I just think it is a little too much like buying into it. And whenever like people zig, I'm trying to zag, right? Like I don't want to buy at someone's apex, and that's what it feels like here. Like I think I saw someone recently, I'm not calling them out, but Kyle Yates on Twitter,
I was gonna call him out.
He said that he moved Pierce to, I think, RB21 in his rankings, which I just think is like way too high. So I would maybe feel comfortable. Here's the thing, like, I just know I'm not going to get him. Like, and I'm okay with that. There's plenty of guys that like, it's not that I have a huge thing against them. It's just at cost right now, I'm okay not getting them. And I mean, maybe I'd feel comfortable in like the RB4 range, but like he's never falling there now.
No,
at this point, he's going like probably the latest I've seen recently in the drafts that I've done is like RB36. So that's pretty late for him right now. So and at that point, I'm just like, just like, I'm okay to be wrong about certain guys. And he's one of those guys.
Yeah, it's getting out of hand. I liked him. You know, you talked about the Scott Fishbowl earlier. For anybody who's not familiar, it's a charity league that the majority of the fantasy community participates in. Our draft started July 11th. And with one of my last picks, I picked Damien Pierce. And you're like, okay, that's a good spot. I was in a draft the other day and he's going in the 3rd round. You're like, well, that's I've been priced out of the market and that's fine. Again, once Rex Burkhead catches 2 touchdowns in week 1 against, who are they playing? The Browns? No, is it? No, it's not the Browns, but whoever it is. It'll be ridiculous. Everybody will panic, and it'll be a lot of fun for us to watch unfold. I do want to, while we have you here, I don't want to keep you too much longer, but since you are Denver correspondent, which Broncos wide receiver do we want? Do we want Cortland Sutton or do we want Jerry Jeudy?
Yeah, so we were talking before about how I go on Broncos radio, and it's a great opportunity to sort of connect with those insiders that are at practice every day, like really into it and have sort of all the insider information. And I was on the show last week, and I told them that Judy's ADP and Sutton's ADP are 5 spots different. Like it's wide receiver 20 and wide receiver 25 or something like that. And they were blown away. They were flabbergasted because they said that Judy and Sutton have no like business being drafted near each other. It's very clearly one guy, and that guy is Courtland Sutton. They said that he is the one that has built the rapport with new quarterback Russell Wilson. He I mean, at least he's the guy that's been proven. He's 3 years removed from a season where he had 1,100 receiving yards. At least he's done it before. Like Judy, I just feel like, and I'm totally there with people. Like I get it because he has the potential and I want to believe in him. Like I just keep thinking, oh, it's bad quarterback play, which by the way, yes, like that's a real thing that they have had for years. Or he's unlucky with injuries. Like he had a major ankle injury for like, I think 7 weeks of last season. So I get it, but it's like where my belief in him is all based on potential and kind of his college production, which was really impressive. But at this point, it's like we're multiple years removed from that. And at this point, I'd rather go with the guy that I know that A, has the rapport with the quarterback, and B, has done it in the past.
No, I love it. I'm a huge on Courtland Sutton, so thank you for saying that, and I appreciate it. Also, though, since you're part of the Action Network, I want to get your take on this. Now, recently, Sports Illustrated came out and predicted the Bears to win 3 games this season. And I know you're probably looking at some future. Listen, I don't know what futures means. I don't know what any betting. I'm not advocating betting. I'm not any of that. I don't know how it works. I don't know how Las Vegas works. I know it's a city in the desert. I've been there a few times. I don't know how any of this works. So I'll just ask you, based on Sports Illustrated's projection, and I know this is probably not what Vegas thinks, but just as they're going on Sports Illustrated, do the Bears win more or less than 3 games, or is 3 the perfect number for them?
I think they win more. So I just had to check. I was actually in my head handicapping this, but I just had to check their over under, and it is 6 wins on DraftKings right now. So I think that it's plausible that I would probably take the under. It's probably going to be between 3 and 6 in my head, but 3 seems really low. Like that's too low. That's like Jaguars low, and I'm not sure that they're there.
Yeah, I think that they've done a better job of acquiring talent. When I see them against teams like Seattle and Atlanta, like those are teams. When I think of 3-win teams, I think of those kind of squads. I think the Bears will be a little bit more competitive. How do you feel about the Lions? Sports Illustrated has the Lions at 9 wins. Are you buying the hype on the Detroit Lions?
So I know that they are like such a sexy pick right now. Everyone's talking about the Lions, and I get it. Like you're getting good value, obviously there. Like there's plenty of money on, them to make the playoffs, and they're over on their win total. I don't know. I have pause. Like in general, I'm not into the 0 to hero narrative. We were so into that with the Jaguars last year. I would say we is the royal we collectively. Everyone seems to think like that's all the Jaguars need. They need a quarterback and a running back. Obviously, Etienne got hurt, but they obviously were not a 0 to hero team. And it just the reality is that is so hard to do, right? Like it's really, really hard. Very few teams, and maybe the Broncos are one of them, and they weren't 0, but like very few teams are like 1 position away, and I know that they have made improvements across the board, but I don't think it's enough to win 9 games. So I would probably put them in that 6-game range, maybe 6 to 5 game range, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. Jared Goff is still their quarterback. I think a lot of people fail to realize that.
Yeah. We've never seen him, I don't know. So yeah, he is Jared Goff. He's surrounded by, there's weapons, there's pieces, but we've also seen teams have pieces and never not be able to put it together. So no, I don't think they're winning 9 games.
He had pieces in Los Angeles with Sean McVay as his head coach and was able to do it once. And they were, whenever I take shots at Jared Goff, I'm like, I don't take my word for it. Take Sean McVay, who traded him. So that's not on me. That's on Sean McVay. I will hide behind him and his beautifully coiffed hair. Well, listen, Samantha.
Sorry.
What's up? No, please tell me.
I just wanted to ask you what you thought of the Alex Leatherwood thing, because obviously a former, former makes it sound like many years ago. Like he is a first round pick from last year. So
first round draft pick last year, an Outland Trophy winner from a high end university. Right. Here's my thing. I really like the approach that Ryan Poles has taken with acquiring a guy who has a lot of upside, who has a lot of potential. He's not being brought in to start. I think the Raiders threw him into the mix, probably threw him in way too early, moved him around a little bit too much. It was kind of similar to what happened to Kyle Long, where they kind of messed him around too much instead of just sticking him in one spot. I think that if they bring him in with I'm assuming they have a plan in mind. Tevin Jenkins looks like he's now entrenched as the right guard. If you could move Leatherwood to, let's say, left guard and eventually be Cody Whitehair's eventual replacement, that's something that I could get behind. You know, it cost them $6 million. They let the Raiders off the hook with that dead cap money, but it's $2 million a year for a guy who was a former first round pick who could develop into something. That's the kind of risk that I want to take, especially with the position the Bears are in right now. And I think, again, it's good to get the outsider's perspective. Like, it's not a hater like Dan Orlovsky, but still, like, a lot of people expect this team to be around 6 wins. I'm a little bit more optimistic. I would take the high side of that. But I think of where this team is right now, getting a guy like Alex Leatherwood makes too much sense. Why did you like that move?
Yeah, I was just like, I couldn't tell if it was a matter of like the Raiders are so bad at drafting, but then again, he was a projected first round pick. I feel like so maybe like people were wrong and he's a second round talent, but he's not a undrafted talent. You know what I mean? So I feel like it's like the guy most likely deserves to be in the league and can probably develop as a starter. So I like the call. I was just surprised to see that the Bears were the only ones to place a claim on him.
Yeah, well, they were, I think their waiver claim position was 7th. So they had they were up there, you know, one of the top 10. They were at least top 10. So I'm surprised he got past them, especially with teams like, well, Jacksonville did a nice job of rebuilding their offensive line. So Carolina might have been in front of them, or the Giants even. That might have been the one that shocked me. Like the Giants, I thought, because when he was released, I'm like, oh, that'd be cool, but the Giants will probably take him. But happy to get him and happy to see what could happen and what could develop over the next couple of years. But listen, Samantha, want to really thank you for your time. We appreciate it. We know this is the busy part of the season for a lot of us in the fantasy community. So I appreciate you doing it. I hope you will return to the island at one point. We would love to have you back. You crushed it, gave a lot of great advice, helped us settle some issues, especially the Cortland Sutton thing, and talk some great draft strategies for the coming weeks. So we appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun, and I will come back anytime you want.
All right, you heard it. She is going to be back here soon. So Samantha, thank you so much. There she goes. The great Samantha Previte, rhymes with graffiti. She's wonderful. Follow her on the Action Network. Follow her on all the social media channels. She's been doling out great advice each and every week and will continue to do so for the entirety of the season. So for everybody here with the Sick Podcast, for our Sammy and for Samantha and for Daniel Greenberg, we appreciate you being here. Till Tuesday night, let's bear down.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Adam Rank on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.